Well, a joint standing committee on migration has held a public hearing into migration in regional Australia. And joining me live now to discuss this is the committee chair, Julian Lisa, the member for Barara. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on this morning, Charlotte.
So talk us through a little bit about these public hearings. You've had a number of them already and they'll still be going. What are you learning from them?
Well, I think the public discussion about migration that we have in our capital cities is very different to the discussion we have in regional Australia. In our capital cities, there's been a question about whether we've got too many people, but in the regions, there are 60,000 unfilled jobs going. And the purpose of this inquiry that the committee is conducting is to work out how we get more migrants to go to regional Australia and to stay there. We did some initial hearings in regional South Australia, in Murray Bridge and in Mount Gambier and in Adelaide, and we're going to Kalgoorlie, Katanning and Perth as our next set of hearings, and we're going right around the country to hear success stories and challenges that migrant communities and employers face.
So migration it's always a contentious issue. These 60,000 jobs, are they jobs that Australians don't want?
They're jobs that Australians can't do. There's not the skills. People have to do testing to ensure that there's no Australian that can fill these jobs. And every business that we've talked to in regional Australia says they'd always prefer to hire an Australian because it's cheaper and it's quicker and it's easier. But there just aren't people to fill the jobs. Let me give you a great example. In the Clare Valley, 2 hours out of Adelaide, one of the great wine growing regions of Australia, an industry that's worth $2 billion to the economy, they can't get vignerons, they can't get chefs for their restaurants, they can't get people to run their cellar doors. If we don't get migrants to fill these jobs, then these industries will fall apart.
So why is that? Just, I guess it's not really the topic you came here to discuss, but why can't we get I mean, we do have an unemployment, you know, we've got plenty of people in Australia that are unemployed that could be filling those jobs. Why can't we get Australians to fill them?
Well, they used to describe 5% unemployment as full employment, and we've got 5.3% unemployment. Yeah. But I think over the years there's been an Australian malaise in some respects, that there are Australians who are available to work who won't work in some of these roles. But also I think people don't see the benefit of the lifestyle in these areas. In regional Australia, the housing is cheaper, the lifestyle is better, the commute is better, the jobs are more secure. And you've got industries that have been going for years and years. What's good about getting migrants in is often they've come from places around the world where the lifestyle's not as good, the conditions are not as favourable, and they've got a hunger and a willingness to work, and I think that's something we've got to encourage.
Yeah, I lived in Tamworth for 2 years and the lifestyle was the best. I've never had a better work-life balance in my life. I think that was a lot of the Sydney traffic was gone. But how important is it for regional businesses to be able to employ migrants, and what are some of the challenges that they're up against in trying to get migrants?
Well, I think it's very important for regional businesses to be able to staff their businesses, whether it's migrants or Australians, because if they don't staff them, they can't run the businesses and the business will have to move elsewhere. But one of the things that regional businesses keep telling us is that it's become too hard to employ migrants. The labour market testing, the minimum salaries that you have to pay migrants. So even if you pay an Australian, say, $40,000 for a job, there's a regulation that says you have to pay a migrant at least $54,000 for a job. There are a range of skill categories that you can bring migrants in that are decided every few years but aren't keeping pace with what's happening on the ground in regional communities. So there's too many roadblocks, regional businesses are telling us.
How do we get rid of those roadblocks?
Well, I think these are things that our committee is going to look at making some recommendations around because we want to make it easier. The government's brought in a bunch of visas to encourage new migrants to choose regional Australia, but our inquiry is not just looking at how those visas are working, it's looking at what else is happening, what can we do to encourage it to be easier for businesses, what can we do to encourage regional migration to be more successful.
And I guess one of the things that you're looking at is the longevity, that migrants don't just come to Australia, do a regional stint and then move to the city.
Absolutely. So one of the things we've done with the visas in recent years is said to people, if you stay for 3 years, that's up from 2 in a regional area, that will be a pathway to permanent residency, and we've said we will prioritise the processing of those visas. We've said to people who are studying at regional campuses that they'll get more time in Australia if they go to a regional campus. We've said to working holiday makers that if they go to a regional area, they will get more time in Australia. So we're putting in place a whole range of incentives for people to go. The question is, how do you get them to stay? And there are communities around Australia that have been there for decades. I mean, I think about the Sikh community in Woolgoolga. We've been looking at the Karen community when we were in Mount Gambier. There's another Karen community there from Burma. They were originally refugees in Western Australia that we're going to meet with. You think about the Italian community around Griffith. There are successful multi-generation migrant communities there. What we need to do is learn from the success and work out what do we need to do to ensure that's replicated elsewhere.
What sort of industries are we most reliant on migrants?
Well, there's a whole range of industries, everything from education with some of the regional university campuses to agriculture to manufacturing. There's quite a lot of food processing that goes on in regional Australia. We take our food processing industry for granted sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of abattoirs as well.
That's correct.
Up near Tamworth, a lot of migrants employed there.
That's right. And this is a job that I think Australians very often won't do because it's dirty work, it's smelly work, it's hard work.
Which is so silly.
It is silly. I mean, what happened to the Australian work attitude?
Yeah.
Whereas what's great about some of these migrants, they are so hungry for an opportunity here. They want to work, they want to contribute, and the businesses want to have them, and the local communities want to have them too, because if a community wants services, if a community wants to be viable, the businesses that support the community have to survive.
Just finally, so once all of these public hearings wrap up, what happens then?
Well, we will report and make some recommendations to government, and it's a matter for the government as to whether they adopt our recommendations or not. We hope to report by the end of the year.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for your time this morning. It's been great to get an insight into migration.